Hey guys, it's Shane, the teen librarian here at the Bangor Public Library, and we are here doing our cooking program for fairy tale foods. So we're going to make foods that are either inspired by fairy tales or kind of a little play on fairy tales. So we're going to make three things today. We're going to make mini pigs in a blanket. We are going to make pumpkin French toast for Cinderella. And we are going to make apple fritters for Snow White. Yes, Snow White. So we're going to start with three little pigs in a blanket. So we're just going to use the little cocktail hot dogs. So we're going to start by making, we're making a really quick biscuit dough. So it goes together really easy, and it's actually easier than making regular biscuits. So we're just going to get right into it, and we'll see what happens. So we're going to start off. We need 1.25 cups of flour. There's our cup and our 1/4 cup. And to this we are going to add 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, and this is basically what we're going to use to help the biscuits rise up a little bit. We don't need this to rise up a ton. So we're just going to use a cup and a cup, yeah. You don't want a cup, like when the day the biscuits took over. So 1.25 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of sugar. And the sugar, it's not going to make it sweet. It's just going to add a little bit of a sweet aftertaste at the end. So all we do is give this a good stir. Make sure we're incorporating all of the baking powder. We also need to add to this 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Just mix everything around. If you notice any big chunks of flour, make sure that those are kind of pushed down. If you notice any big chunks of baking powder, make sure you kind of whisk those through. There's absolutely nothing worse than biting into anything that has baking powder in it and just getting a big mouthful of baking powder. It's not tasty. Okay, so this looks good, except for that little piece of baking powder right there. So now we're just going to make a little well in the middle of this. And by well, I mean we're just going to push the flour mixture off to the sides so we can kind of see the bottom of the bowl. And to this, we're going to add 1/2 cup of milk. And 1/3 cup of melted butter. Minus the plastic. And we're going to give this a light whisk. We don't want to work this too much, so we're just going to kind of whisk this until it comes together. And it's going to be relatively wet when it first comes together, and that's okay. Alright, sometimes you got to do that. Sorry. Alright, so we're going to flour our prep surface here. And we are going to just sort of dump this right onto the flour. And we're going to put just a little bit of flour on the top of this, just so it's not sticky tacky. You don't want a ton because you don't want it to be too dry. We're going to kind of pull it together. Maybe give it a 1 or 2 kneads just to make sure it's not too sticky. If it still feels a little sticky, just put a little more flour on. It shouldn't take too much more. All right. So we are going to work this a little more than we would an actual biscuit dough. Normally with the biscuit dough, you don't want to do too much to this. You want to leave it as nice and tender as possible. But since we're taking the rolling pin to it, I don't think it matters. So we've got it here. Now all we do is roll it out. And you want this pretty thin. You want it to actually be about 1/4 of an inch. So it's thinner than you'd probably think, because it is going to cook up a little bit. So you don't want a really thick blanket around your, unless it's like mid-December. You don't really want a really thick blanket around your hot dog, because you want to taste the hot dog. If you notice it's still a little sticky, just a little bit of flour. And a little bit goes a long way. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt by not putting too much. You can always add a little bit more, but if you add too much, you really can't take it away at this point. So now we have our nice biscuit dough ready to go. We've got it nice and rolled out. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take our knife, which I put away, and we're going to make about, so I'm going to take off just some of the edges to make it a little easier. We're going to make about an inch cut, in inch batches, so an inch line all the way down. So depending on how you've rolled it out, you're probably going to get 4 or 5 cuts here. And if you have a little excess at the end, it's okay, just move it off to the side. And I'm just going to square the tops off, get rid of some of that, square the bottom off. Alright, so now we've done an inch row, now we're going to go an inch across the other way. So what you're going to end up with are about 1 inch by 1 inch squares. So you'll end up with your little blankets. So now, the really easy thing, you just take your little Smokies, little Franks, whatever you're using, and just kind of dab them clean. You want to make sure that a lot of the liquid is off, because if you don't, what will happen is it'll kind of steam when it's inside of the blanket, and it'll give you kind of a wet, kind of gross interior to your blanket, which nobody wants. So we just take our blanket and we flatten it out just a little bit, and we take one hot dog and we just roll it in the blanket and just kind of pinch the edges together. And that's how simple it is. We're going to put these onto a baking sheet. Right down in front. I'm just going to keep going with this. This is going to take me a couple minutes, so I'm not going to make you sit here and watch me do it. So I'm going to go ahead and get all these wrapped, and we'll see you in just a couple minutes. Alright, so we've got all of our little hot dogs wrapped in our blankets. This is kind of what it looks like. If you wanted to, you could put like a milk egg wash or an egg wash, or just like a butter glaze over the top to make it a little bit browner. We're not going to do that right now. We're just going to throw them in a 400-degree oven for about 15 minutes. And when they come out, the biscuits will have puffed up. They'll be nice and tasty. So while those are cooking, we're going to go ahead and make a sweet hot mustard to serve with these. Alright, so now we're going to make the sweet hot mustard that's going to go with our 3 little pigs in the blanket. I've taken some steps beforehand, just because the mustard, the dry mustard and the vinegar mixture needs to actually sit overnight. So basically what you're going to do is you're going to take 4 ounces of just dry mustard, ground mustard, doesn't matter what kind, as long as it's a ground mustard, and 1 cup of distilled vinegar. You can probably get away with an apple cider vinegar, but you don't want a whole lot of flavor besides what's going in here. So what you do is you just pour your vinegar in, dump your mustard in, and give it a good whisk. So you want to whisk all the lumps out. And what you end up with is a really pretty runny mustard. The reason that we do this is because we want to pull out the full flavor of the mustard. So it's called blooming. So we're basically allowing all of that dried mustard to sort of soak up all that vinegar, and it's going to sort of open up, and it's going to just sort of give off all of its flavor. So you're going to get all the heat from it, and you're going to get all the flavor from it. And what you kind of end up with is actually, it's for as wet as you put it into the refrigerator. So you just put a piece of plastic over it, put it in the fridge, and let it sit overnight. And what you end up with is this really thick paste. And that's basically because the ground mustard has soaked up all of the vinegar. So just kind of give this another quick whisk, just to get any lumps out. And we are going to make our sweet hot mustard. It's really simple to make, actually. It's 1 cup of mustard, so there's our heat. 1 egg. And our mustard vinegar mixture that we let set overnight. And that's it. So you'll notice that we're not adding any other liquids to this. We want this to be relatively thick, and what's going to happen is the vinegar that is in with the mustard is actually going to sort of be released by the mustard, and it's going to thin out a little bit. That's why we're kind of putting the egg in there to help thicken it back up. And the egg kind of gives it like a really creamy texture that you don't normally get with mustard. So we're just going to whisk this up, get all of the lumps out. Now we want to bring this up to about 145 for a temperature. You don't want to let this get too hot because you'll actually start to scramble the eggs. And if you do that, you're going to end up with sort of lumpy little scrambled eggs in here. And that's not really what we're going for. We're going for a nice smooth mustard. But we do want to make sure that we're cooking it enough to make sure that we're cooking the egg to a safe enough temperature. So you want to get somewhere between 145 and 165. If you have a little thermometer, that's the best thing to use. You just kind of stick it in there until it gets to 145. If you've got a digital one, that's even better because you just kind of like aim it at the surface and it will tell you what it's getting to. But basically, when you start to see it bubble just a little bit, you don't want this to boil at all, because if you're boiling, you're well above your 165, and you've probably already got a whole bunch of just scrambled eggs with sweet hot mustard. So we're just going to let this go until we're up to the right temp. It's going to take a couple of minutes. And just kind of keep stirring until you get there. Okay, so you might not be able to see it, but you're starting to get a little bit of steam coming off the top. That means you know you're getting really close. You may start hearing it a little bit on the bottom. You might hear a little bit of bubbling on the bottom. And you notice that you're really smooth, and we've got a pretty good consistency right now. So at this point, we're going to take it off the stove. And we're going to let it cool down. So I'm going to put it into a jar and let it cool down. I'll probably put it in the fridge and just let it come to a fridge temp. And then it's set to use. So it's that easy to make. If you notice that you do scramble your eggs a little bit, it's all right. Just kind of run it through a mesh strainer and just kind of push the mustard through. It's really not that big of a deal. You can even leave it in there. It's not really that big of a deal. But if you want that nice smooth consistency, and you do notice that there's some lumps in there, just run it through a strainer and it'll be fine. So we're going to put that in a jar and put it in the fridge, and then we're going to be able to eat. So when they come out of the oven, you can kind of plate them up any way you want and just serve them with the sweet hot mustard and enjoy. So that was the 3 Little Pigs in a Blanket and the sweet hot mustard to go with it. And now we're going to move along into Cinderella land. We're going to make a pumpkin French toast. Obviously, pumpkins played a pretty big deal in Cinderella. They're going to play a pretty big deal in our French toast. So we're actually going to start with a little pumpkin butter first. So I've just got 4 tablespoons of butter. I've just got it softened here. So you don't want it melted, but you don't want it hard. You want to be able to kind of get a good mix in here. So to this, we're just going to add 2 tablespoons of pumpkin puree. So you'll get the can. So make sure it just says pumpkin, not pumpkin pie mix or pumpkin pie pumpkin. You just want regular pumpkin, because the pumpkin pie stuff already has all your spices and ingredients in it. So to this, we're going to add about 2 tablespoons of maple syrup. And we're going to add a 1/4 of a teaspoon of pumpkin pie spice. So this is where, other side of the table, this is where the spice will come in. So this is already the spice that would be in the pumpkin pie, but it's going to be a lot spicier than what we want. We only want about a 1/4 of a teaspoon. And then just a pinch of salt. So we're putting salt in here just to sort of enhance all of those flavors. And then just give it a good stir. Get all those ingredients incorporated. And then you're going to put this back in the fridge and just kind of let it harden up a little bit. So that's it for the butter. Super simple. It's just a compound butter where you just take all your ingredients and add it in, and that's it. Just going to cover it. Throw it in the fridge just to let it set a little bit. It doesn't actually need to be set. I mean, you can have it, you can do it like this and it'll actually melt a little bit quicker, but I'm just going to put it back in for now. So now we are on to our French toast mixture. Basically, we're making a custard mixture. So normally what you're using is just eggs and milk and vanilla and a little bit of sweetener. And that's basically what we're doing. We're just going to add a little bit of flavor to it to just sort of enhance that pumpkin flavor. So we're going to use 3/4 of a cup of some sort of milk. I've got heavy whipping cream because why not? If you're going to go big, go bigger. So I need 3/4 of a cup of this, but if you just have regular milk, whatever you have for milk will work. To that, I'm going to add our 4 eggs. Then I'm going to do about 1/2 cup of the pumpkin puree. I'm not sure why this was the only spoon I could find right now, so this might take a while. Alright, put that right in there. We're going to add a tablespoon of vanilla extract.
You mean teaspoon?
A teaspoon or a tablespoon. I don't know. My paper says a teaspoon, so whatever I said, do a teaspoon. We're going to add a little bit of pumpkin pie spice to this. And whatever I mess up in filming here, I'm going to have the recipes on our website, so you're probably best not to listen to me right now, just kind of watch and go through the motion of actually making it, because I don't really know what I'm saying right now. But the recipes will be up on our website, so just go to www.bangorpubliclibrary.org, go to the team page, and it'll be right on the top there. We're going to add a little bit more salt. And that's it. So this is our custard for our French toast. So we're just going to give this a quick whisk. Make sure we get all those eggs whipped up. So this is going to give you a nice thick custard, so it's going to adhere to the toast really well. Sometimes when you have a custard mix for French toast, it's really thin and it just all drips off. This is going to be nice and thick, so you're going to get a lot of that good flavor that's just going to stick to the bread. Alright, so we are going to let this is almost ready. We're going to let that come up to temperature. Basically all we're going to do is we're going to butter our griddle, say that 10 times fast, and then we're going to use our bread. So you can use any bread you like. I usually buy bread that hasn't been cut yet because I want a nice thick slice. If you're going to have French toast, you want like a nice thick slice. Sometimes you can find Texas toast in the store. That's a great option too because it's a nice thick piece. If you use just like the regular bread or the Canadian white bread, it's really thin. It doesn't really soak up the mixture the way a nice thick piece of bread does. So I like to have a nice thick cut, at least about an inch. That's not hot. Don't worry about that. We're worried about the griddle right now. So while that's coming up, I'm just going to set some stuff off to the side. Okay, so all we're going to do, you can use spray, you can use butter, whatever you want to do. I like butter just because, again, why not? Butter is going to add a nice extra level of flavor where the spray isn't, but if you're worried about butter or trans fats in butter, just use the spray. So you're going to soak this in your mixture, really get it in there. You know you're doing it right when you hear that nice sizzle when it hits. So we're just going to do this with each of the slices. So when I cut a loaf like this, I get about 8 pieces. That's usually good for a serving or 2, depending on how hungry you are, or 3 or 4. Alright, so we're going to let this cook. Because they're so thick, we're going to let these cook probably like 2 minutes to 3 minutes aside till it's nice and golden. We're going to flip it, cook it another 2-3 minutes, and then it's going to be ready to eat. So we'll see you back here in just a few minutes when these are all set, and we'll be ready to eat. Alright, so we're just going to finish taking these off the griddle. Not grill, a griddle. I think this would be a totally different meal if you tried to make this on a grill. Okay, so I've got them all nice and browned up. Now we just have to serve them. So we cut them diagonally and put them on a plate, like so. And we put a little bit of this pumpkin butter. Let that melt over the top. And then, because we can, we're going to hit it with a little powdered sugar. And that is your pumpkin French toast. Super simple to make. And you can pretty much make that any weekend. I hope you give this a try and enjoy it. If there's anything you don't like about it or you want to change, that's the beauty of it. It's your recipe. The good thing about making things like this is you don't have to be exact on your measurements, you don't have to be exact in your flavors, you can kind of do whatever you want. So hopefully you'll try this and hopefully you'll enjoy it. And then next we're going to be making apple fritters for Snow White. So thanks. Alright, so now we are on to our final food of the afternoon. We're going to make apple fritters for Snow White. So we're just going to use Granny Smith apples, the green ones. I like a sharper tartar apple for this because you want something that's going to be strong enough flavor-wise to stand up against sort of the dough that we're putting it in. The dough is kind of a sweet dough, so you want something a little sharper to balance that. So fritters are really easy. It's basically just fried dough with apples in it. So we're going to make a really quick batter, and then we're going to fry them. So really quick, it throws together real quick. So we're going to get a cup of flour, two teaspoons of baking powder. So this is going to help the batter. So it's going to look really weird when we're done. It's not going to look like much of anything. And you're going to wonder how in the world it's going to come out and be like a nice puffy fritter. This baking powder is really going to help the dough rise. So we're going to use two whole teaspoons, a half a teaspoon of cinnamon just to give a little bit of flavor. If you want to go a little crazy, you can add a whole teaspoon, not a tablespoon. And half a teaspoon of salt. Again, this is just going to bring out all the flavors. So that's it for dry ingredients. We're going to use our whisk and just whisk this together. And again, like with the biscuit batter, any sort of dough you're making, you want to make sure you don't have any big clumps of flour, you don't have any big clumps of baking powder, baking soda, whatever you're using for your leavening agent. So just whisk it around so everything looks nice and wet. Okay, so that's it for the dry ingredients. Super simple. Now we're going to combine our wet ingredients. And when you're baking, it's pretty much always the same step. You do your dry stuff, you do your dry ingredients, then you do your wet ingredients, and then you usually combine them somehow. So whenever you're sort of baking, those are your 2 steps. Sometimes they break it up into 3 steps and they make you add your fat against your flour, or they make you do your flour and your milk and kind of go opposite each other. But we're just going to go through. This is just a really simple batter. So this is going to be sugar and eggs. So we need our 2 eggs, and 2 big tablespoons of sugar. Okay, so we're just going to use our hand mixer. If you have a bowl mixer, feel free to use it. I'm just going to use this one here. We're going to whip this until it starts to get a little fluffy. It's going to be a light yellow batter, and it's just going to be nice and fluffy. All the sugar will be incorporated. You won't really see too many grains. And so this is going to be really loud for a minute. You're not going to hear me talk. So I'm just going to let it go ahead and whip up, and it should take, maybe a minute or 2. bubbles there. That's going to be good. That's going to help help the batter rise when it starts to fry. So we're good there. We're going to add our dry ingredients. We're going to do this in 2 stages just because we want to make sure that all the flour gets incorporated, and we don't want flour to go everywhere when we start this up. So always make sure your paddles are on the bottom of the bowl before you start. And give it a nice whisk. Alright, so that's the dry ingredients. Now we're going to add a 1/4 cup of milk. This is just to add a little bit of moisture to your batter. Alright, you're just going to mix that enough to make sure that it's not dry, and then we're going to go, we're just going to make sure we have everything. Alright, so now we're going to fold in our Granny Smith apples. So this is 3 medium-sized Granny Smith apples. And we're just going to fold this in. And it's going to look like you've got too many apples and not enough batter. But don't worry about it, because of the way we whipped the eggs. That's going to help bring some height to your batter, and because we're using so much baking powder, that's also going to help. So right now it looks just like really wet apples, but it's going to work. So we're going to put these in our fry oil. We need it to be about 375, and we're just going to cook them until they're golden brown. So we're going to do that in just a second. Okay, so this is how simple it is. You just take a scoopful of your batter and you put it in. So this oil is 375, if I didn't say that. And you're going to let it cook until it's golden brown on one side, and then you're going to flip it over and cook it until it's golden brown on the other side. And then we're going to take them out and we're going to put them on a paper towel lined wire cookie rack so the grease can drip down. And then we're going to glaze them. So while these are cooking, I'm going to go ahead and make a really quick glaze to put on top of them, and they're going to be just delicious. Alright, so all we need for the batter, or for the glaze, is 1 1/4 cups of powdered sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla, and 4 to 6 tablespoons of water. So I've already got my powdered sugar in there. We're going to do 1/4 of this. If you do a little bit more than that, it's okay. It's just vanilla. And then we're going to start with about 4 tablespoons. See how it looks. If it looks a little thick, we're going to add a little more water. So it's best to kind of do this where you've got a little less liquid than you need, because you can always add a little bit more. And if you need to, you can always add a little bit more powdered sugar. Now this is going to be a relatively thin, this is a little too thin, I'm going to add a little bit more. You actually want this pretty thin. Because you really want it to sort of almost just kind of roll over the top of the fritter. Alright, so this is all set. We are going to check on our fritters. So once you've let them cool down, you do want to let them cool down at this point. You've let them glaze. That glaze is going to kind of harden over the top and sink down in. But right now it's just way too hot to eat. You're going to give this a couple minutes to cool down. 5-10 minutes is best. And then if you want, you can cover with a little more powdered sugar. And those are ready to eat. That's it for this week's team program. This was Fairy Tale Foods. I hope you had fun. I hope you try these. If you do, let me know. Let me know what you think, and enjoy. Thanks.